And we are live. Welcome to the NBA Strategy Show. It is Friday, October 22nd. I am Josh Engleman. I am joined by Adam Scherer, and we are here to break down a 10-game NBA main slate. Probably more games than I want, but better than 11, I guess, and definitely better than 3. Either way, let's start this off the only way that we know how. Please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell so you know when everything goes live. And give a shout out to PrizePicks, the presenting sponsor of this show. We will talk about PrizePicks in a little bit. I'm going to hit Adam with a couple over-unders for some fantasy points. We'll see where Adam ends up landing there. Now, let's bring in Adam. Adam, what's going on?
Not much. Excited for a full slate. Like you said, I think we're on the same page. Rather have 8 games or something. But 10 games, I think, better than 3, better than 11. So can't be too upset. It sounds like we both had almost good DFS nights last night, and then I think we both lost money. So almost. Maybe we'll get there tonight.
Yeah. Evidently, I went to bed at like 9:45 last night. Call it 10 if you want. By the time the eyes are actually shut, I woke up to quite a few messages on Twitter. A lot of people pulling for me to win 100K. I did not win 100K. I did lose 50% of my entry fees, though. But that's how DFS works. Look, given where my exposures were yesterday at lock, the fact that I had 2 lineups that ever even had a chance to be near the top of the contest is amazing, because everybody that I touched turned to shit. Worked out anyway, though, so we'll take it. T.O. Deck.
There was one point. Oh, I was going to say that there was one point yesterday where I was winning the NFL Millie, the NHL big tournament, and I was winning the NBA Showdown tournament for the late game all at the same time, but none of those happened.
Yeah. Would you have cashed out any of the equity on some of those? The football one, probably.
The football one, yeah.
Yeah. Just because the swings there are the most ridiculous.
Probably also the hockey one, because I know you don't pay attention to hockey, but the best player in the NHL is on Edmonton. Edmonton always plays at 10 o'clock or 10:30 or whatever. So it's kind of like just every single slate having Coors Field not started yet, and so it was the only game still going, and it was still just there's going to be 5 goals here. It's just a matter of who gets them. So I probably would have cashed out hockey just to not have to sweat that.
Who's the best player in hockey?
Connor McDavid.
Okay, it was Wayne Gretzky. Apparently, per TO Deck, I was 20 projected points above everyone else in the top 10 for a bit, which that doesn't feel great either.
Yeah, that doesn't sound like it.
I don't know what happened then. It would be really cool if someone put together a thing where you could load in all of the play-by-play data and sort of move a thing to see where your lineup was at 11:59 and what happened after that. But I don't know. I also don't care. Let's talk 10 basketball games for today. We got a ton to do, and we're going to kick it off, if you are ready, with my Charlotte Hornets. They are taking on a woeful Cleveland Cavaliers team. Hornets 3.5-point favorites in Cleveland, 219 total. Terry Rozier, questionable. That is an important piece of information. Darius Garland, also questionable. Another important piece of information. What do we want to do with a Charlotte Hornets team that I find to be very difficult to focus on, because I think everybody just looks super similar relative to their salary?
I agree mostly. I think that clearly LaMelo Ball gives you a massive ceiling. I'm not really concerned one way or the other if Rozier is in. If he's out, I think the ceiling gets a little bit higher for LaMelo, but either way, he's around a 1.25 DraftKings points per minute guy. He did only play 30 minutes in that first game. He had a little bit of foul trouble in the first half. I think that, based on that rotation, you would expect around 32 minutes from him. But that's the only, slight concern I have, is that, he didn't play more minutes in that game, but he still scored 60 DraftKings points, which gives you an idea of, how good he can be in any given game. He's still reasonably priced at 7,700. Gordon Hayward, I think, is a reasonable option as well, especially if he's not going to be very popular. He's typically not the type of guy at this salary that I want to give a lot of if he's getting ownership on a 10-game slate, but he did play 35 minutes in that game. That was a game where, coming in, Charlotte had said they were a little bit concerned about Hayward's conditioning, that he wasn't on a minutes restriction, but that they were going to judge it by how he was playing. They said after the game that they were very surprised he was able to play 35 minutes, but that they were very happy with what they saw. So I think you're back in a situation kind of like we saw last year where Hayward, not the best fantasy point per minute guy on the team, but he's still good, 1 to 1.1 fantasy points per minute. But I think it's likely he ends up, leading the team in minutes here. So I think he looks reasonable. Those are the two that stand out. Mason Plumlee is 6,500 on DraftKings. If he were a little bit cheaper, I'd be interested. He was one spot where going into that last game, I think just across the industry, everybody had his playing time under projected. And I'm not saying that like they were wrong at the time because you didn't really know how this front court was going to look. But Mason Plumlee played 32 minutes in that game. I think that, if Terry Rozier is in, then there's obviously another body in the rotation. Maybe Plumlee comes down to like 28 minutes, but I do think that it seems based on that rotation, like Plumlee's going to play pretty healthy minutes here as the starting center. But with that price tag coming up, it's still pretty difficult to get to him.
I don't really have like a feel for Rozier if he plays or not. I have him in for right now. I don't think that it's going to change all that much for me. I was just pretty surprised to see James Bouknight not get onto the floor for the Hornets in game one, but it's not really a big deal. Right now, I have Kelly Oubre at 5,100 on FanDuel as my probably favorite play in this game. I'm going to have Charlotte. I just don't think that I'm going to have any one individual outside of probably LaMelo.
How much does that Oubre FanDuel play depend on Rozier for you?
Probably a lot. No, actually, probably not all that much, honestly. I think he's just going to have to get relatively big minutes just because he can move so... Charlotte's unique in that, like with Hayward, with LaMelo, Bridges, Oubre, like these guys can move up and down the position. Whoop, I hit my mic. Move up and down the positional spectrum so easily that they can all just sort of soak up minutes anywhere. And I don't think it matters. And I think it's just better than having to play more Jalen McDaniels or more Cody Martin.
Right. That's kind of what I was going to say was you could see Oubre still play 30, give or take, off the bench. He played 35 last game. I wouldn't expect that if Rozier is back, but you could still see him get around 30 minutes. You also could see him lose a few minutes. It all depends on, are they gonna keep Jalen McDaniels in the rotation to play 6 to 8 minutes, or are they just gonna throw those minutes to Kelly Oubre?
Ronald Jones showing up a little bit late, letting me know that I was winning $100,000 and don't have it today. I'm really excited for this to go away. Do you have anything else you want to touch on for the Hornets?
No, I think that covers it. Rozier at 6,800 if he's in. I wouldn't really be interested there. I would not expect him to play tons of minutes. I'm not saying that I think he's playing 18 minutes or anything like that, but I wouldn't expect him to go from not being able to play and then being cautious with him to, running up for 32 or 33 minutes or anything like that. So he would not be someone I'm really interested in.
All right. On the Cleveland side, we are waiting on news for Darius Garland. He is questionable. We saw a big price bump in Evan Mobley, 6,100 on FanDuel now, 6,900, which is not nice on DraftKings. Lauri Markkanen started at small forward. We did not see Isaac Okoro start at that spot, which is wild to me, but also Isaac Okoro was arguably the worst NBA player in the league last year. So maybe you do need to make that kind of change. I'm not all that enamored with Cleveland. I don't see all that much here. I think Markkanen, just relative to salary, is probably my favorite option, but I use the term favorite pretty loosely.
That's pretty much where I am as well. I think Markkanen definitely deserves a mention here just because he played the second most minutes on the team. Third most minutes on the team, 31 and a half minutes. He got that start, but also, I thought going into that game, there was a good chance that you saw, 26, 27 minutes from Markkanen. So him getting to 31 and a half minutes is pretty appealing. I think that at his salary, he's not, on a 10-game slate, he's not a huge priority, but I do think he's a good option. And I am still in tournaments, at least somewhat interested in Mobley. He played huge minutes in that game, led the team with 38.3 minutes. I'm not expecting a repeat of that, but if you're going to get 35 or 36 minutes from him, I expect him to be around a 1 fantasy point per minute guy. His usage rate in that game was about 16%, which is in line with what he did in the preseason, but he also contributes rebounds. He also contributes a bit in the way of assists. So he just seems like a productive player when he's on the floor. I'm definitely not going out of my way to get to him at this salary. I was way over the field at 4,100 last time out. Totally different here at 6,900. But I do think that Markkanen and Mobley would be the top two guys for me here. I'm a little concerned about the way the rest of the rotation looked. You only got 29.3 minutes for Colin Sexton. It was just kind of like a flat rotation. Rubio played 25 minutes off the bench. You had 30 minutes from Sexton. You had 32 from Garland. It's those guys aren't priced for 30 to 32 minutes. Sexton and Garland, you need them playing 36, 37 minutes right now. And based on the rotation last game, I'm not confident in getting that.
I know you sort of mentioned Mobley there. I was doing a couple things. So if you said this, my apologies. What is your actual expectation for his minutes coming out of that first game? Because clearly the expectation is not to run out 38 minutes again.
Yeah, I mean, I think 35 or 36 is like a good estimate, but it wouldn't be surprising at all. I don't know. I guess based on the way that game looked or that rotation went, I kind of expect him to end up settling into like 34 to 36 minutes. But I wouldn't be surprised if it's one of those where, sometimes he plays 38 and then the next time he plays 30. And, I don't necessarily think it's going to be a consistent number of, just consistently hitting 35, 36. But I do just like that right out of the gate, he went out, he played a ton of minutes. It kind of just, to me, suggests that Cleveland is, looking to get him a bunch of run.
Okay. Yeah, I don't. Right now, I have him in for 34, which
I think it's reasonable.
It just makes a $6,900 price tag pretty difficult. It's hard for me to like Cleveland because they're one of the worst offenses in basketball. So
yeah,
I got nothing else here.
Like from this team, I would expect Markkanen to be who I get to the most.
Okay, you and me both. We'll keep it moving. Let's go to the New York Knicks at the Orlando Magic. Knicks are 7-point favorites, 212 total. Nerlens Noel is out for the Knicks. I got to take a pretty deep breath here for Orlando. Out for Orlando. Markelle Fultz, Chuma Okeke, Jonathan Isaac, Eton Moore, Michael Carter-Williams, and then who was named as starter before the beginning of game one and then immediately scratched and now is out for an extended amount of time. That would be Gary Harris. Taj Gibson, questionable. We saw New York play a bunch of Obi Toppin and Julius Randle late in their first game. This game, they also went to double overtime. So be aware that when you look at these minutes totals, they're mostly meaningless. You really need to cut out those 2 overtime periods. But if I'm looking at New York here against Orlando, this is the lowest total on the slate. It's not even particularly close. But Julius Randle's 8,500 and that price tag is silly. And 5,800 for RJ Barrett feels pretty silly too.
Yeah, Randle in particular, we talked about him last slate, and I actually ended up kind of not trusting myself and cutting back a minute or two off of him because I felt like I was getting too much. But he was playing 35 minutes in the preseason. He came out, played 36 in regulation last time out. Thibodeau is going to just run him into the ground. He's still going to be a productive player with Kemba Walker there. There's no real reason to think that he's not. He's around, 1.2 to 1.25 fantasy point per minute guy playing 36, 37 minutes a night. So at that price tag, I still do really like Randle. Barrett is fine. More neutral on him than I am on Randle, I think, but you can expect big minutes from him as well. He played 37 minutes in regulation, played every single minute in the second half on opening night because why not? So that's, certainly reasonable, a reasonable option. Right. And then the other spots I think you want to pay attention to is, Taj Gibson listed as questionable right now for personal reasons. You got Obi Toppin playing 27 or so minutes in regulation. Very, very weird rotation where he played almost the entire second half once he subbed in for Mitchell Robinson in the third quarter. But just seeing those extended minutes, at 4,300, a deep value play if Gibson's out. Still not a priority just because I think more often than not, you're getting something like 22 minutes instead of 28.
Yeah. Randle, by the way, ownership posted. Randle in at 14% on DraftKings. I don't want to say that I'm immediately going to want to have a lot more than that because everything is relative, but that feels a little low given he's 8,500.
Yeah, I agree.
Barrett at 9, I'd be happy to have that or a little bit more. I don't really see New York as all that interesting on FanDuel, though. The pricing just doesn't work all that well for me. I don't have anything else for the Knicks.
No, neither do I. The rest of the rotation just didn't look very appealing. Derrick Rose only played 22 and a half minutes, including 5 minutes in overtime. So that's not making me feel very confident in his playing time right out of the gate, which makes sense. There's no real reason for Derrick Rose to be playing 30 minutes a game right now, other than
his coach.
Yeah, other than his coach. Yeah, I'm not saying I would have been surprised if he did play 30 minutes, right. But I think that using him as the backup to Kemba Walker right now, I think just makes some sense. Maybe down the stretch they start using him more, like in place of Fournier or something. But for now, I think that makes sense. So there's not too much else to see here for me.
Yeah, if I don't want to say that Tibbs isn't a smart coach, but like a logical coach would just be like, oh, cool. I got Derrick Rose. I got Kemba Walker. They both need to be babied from a playing time perspective. They can just split a bunch of time, like this is going to be real easy. 24 minutes apiece, keep these guys fresh as a daisy till the playoffs, which means that Kemba and Derrick Rose are going to start alongside of each other and play 40 minutes a game in 3 weeks.
Yeah. Kemba, 35 and a half minutes right out of the gate. Granted, it was only 30 in regulation, but
yeah. Like the double OT thing is a problem, but like, yeah, Kemba's legs are just going to fall off by the time this is over. All right, let's go.
It's like 0 minutes alongside each other though. So
yeah,
I mean, as long as that continues, Derrick Rose is just not going to be playable until he gets down to 4,500 or something.
Yeah, that's you can't really play those two guys alongside of each other at this point in time. Derrick Rose, never much of a defender. Kemba Walker, very clearly not a defender. All righty. On the Orlando side, unfortunately for us, we're going to need to roster a bunch of Orlando Magic, or at least it seems like we will. For example, Jalen Suggs is 4K on DraftKings. He's projected for 30% ownership. Franz Wagner led the team, I believe, in minutes. He is 4K on FanDuel, 4,500 on DraftKings. Cole Anthony pulling heavy ownership on FanDuel, only $4,900, $1,400 cheaper than he is on DK. This entire Orlando Magic team is underpriced on FanDuel to a large degree, so much so that the total aggregate ownership for Orlando on DraftKings is 56%. It's 105 on FanDuel. Everybody is just ultra cheap. Like even RJ Hampton becomes a value option at 3,900 on FanDuel. He's 4,700 on DraftKings. Either way, Jalen Suggs on DK, you got to play a bundle of him. I think he looks really good. I hate that I'm going to play a lot of Orlando in a matchup against a decent defense, especially if Taj can play, and an Orlando team that I don't know if there's a single above average offensive player on this team.
Is Orlando like the deepest team in the league? Not in the sense of like deep in a good way, but just like half their team is out and they're still running a 10-man rotation of guys that are, at least, NBA players. It's not like you're throwing like total G Leaguers in there. It's just.
Yeah, I mean, the only guy that's like a total scrub, like I don't want to say scrub, but like Iggy Brazdeikis is the only guy that probably shouldn't be out there.
Yeah, exactly. It's just like they're one of those teams where you see all these injuries and then you see the guys that are still playing and you're like, how are all these guys on the same NBA team? Like you don't have any actual good players, but you also just like don't have bad players. But yeah, it's a tricky spot. You mentioned, all the ownership on FanDuel at very, very favorable pricing. The pricing clearly is good, but it is a tough matchup against the Knicks. This is a team that is just likely to struggle offensively. I'm with you. Jalen Suggs played 30.3 minutes. He had one of the highest usage rates on the team, 24.7% in that game. Only Cole Anthony had a higher usage rate at 25%. So at 4K, I think Suggs looks good. He's the only guy really getting ownership on DraftKings. I think it makes sense. Certainly on a 10-game slate, you can get away in some tournament lineups, but it kind of just goes back to NBA being a different animal in terms of ownership. If this were like a sport with the volatility of football or baseball, and you had someone like Suggs in a matchup like this, I would probably be actively looking for alternatives. Whereas here, it's just kind of like, yeah, the ownership makes sense. He's cheap. It's basketball. So I think Suggs looks good. I think that Franz Wagner, like you said, 4,500. He played big minutes as the starter there, led the team actually with 32.3 minutes. Certainly can look to him as well. The salary, I think, is reasonable. I'm glad that we didn't get him staying at 3K. That would have been really annoying. He did have the lowest usage rate on the team, 12% in that game. So certainly not a lot of confidence in what he's going to do on the floor, but the minutes should be there.
This team is going to be a problem for me on FanDuel. So I'm hoping their ownership like rises so much that I'm just naturally under and they're not the guys that I get to, because fading Orlando ownership feels fine to me. Like I think they should be owned, but if I'm going to have somebody else, I'd rather cheer for somebody else. I don't want to have to watch Knicks Magic at 7:00 because I can't watch the Hornets game because I'll be blacked out. I guess I'll watch Indiana, Washington. But I watch too much of your Wizards. I don't have anything else for Knicks Magic.
I didn't see any.
I saw the first half. I'm
trying to figure out what the hell the center rotation is doing, but
it doesn't help that their centers play power forward too.
Well, right. Yeah, I should have said front court rotation because so Robin Lopez didn't even sub in until the second quarter. But then he was the first guy off the bench in the third quarter when Mo Bamba got in some foul trouble. The first sub for Bamba though was Mo Wagner. Yeah, I basically was just trying to see if maybe there was a chance that like Rolo DNP'd here and you got more minutes for some guys, but I don't feel confident projecting that.
At some point in time, I'm going to need the Orlando Magic brass to let me know why they signed Robin Lopez.
Seems like a cool guy.
Yeah, and like I'm sure he wanted to live in Orlando. He's like a goof about Disney. You should talk to Jason Roslin. Yeah. But like, I mean, he just strikes me as a guy that's going to like get bought out at the deadline and then end up on like the 3 seed to some random team. Like,
I mean, the actual answer is
he's a good backup and should probably play like 6 to 8 minutes for like teams that matter in deep playoff runs. He's a good rim protector.
For signing him probably is just as like a coach for Bamba and Carter, right?
Yeah, maybe.
He probably he probably likes Orlando and he was cool with the role and they were just like, okay, cool. Here's some money. Go play 10 minutes and coach these guys.
Yeah, I wouldn't have I would have thought someone else would have wanted him. It's weird. I don't know. Maybe I don't know shit. All right, let's move it on to Indy and Washington. 1.5 point dogs for Indy in Washington. Indiana. Yeah, this isn't football. Indiana Pacers gacked away a gigantic lead against the Hornets on opening night, real opening night. For the Pacers, Karis LeVert, TJ Warren, Keelan Martin out. Rui Hachimura and Thomas Bryant out for Washington. And then Justin Holiday, Torrey Craig, and Jeremy Lamb all questionable for the Pacers. I'm treating them all like they're in for right now. Decent amount of ownership coming into this Pacers team on both sites. Sabonis around 20%. I think that's about right. Malcolm Brogdon, 12%. Don't think he's going to play 40 minutes again, but they certainly had no problem doing it. They had an 8-man rotation on opening night, which is hilarious. I think Jeremy Lamb is pretty interesting at 3,700 on DraftKings if he's going to just be a part of a rotation, playing 20 minutes and 20 plus minutes. We've got someone like Miles Turner on FanDuel again at 5,900, who I'm always just interested in, especially when he's got that power forward eligibility. What stands out to you from the Pacers against the Wizards?
A couple of things. You mentioned Jeremy Lamb. I agree with that. The 8-man rotation is really interesting to me because it's doable. And you do have to keep in mind that you have a new coach in Indiana as well. So you can't just automatically go back to, oh, well, they'll settle into the roles that they had last year or the minutes they had last year. All that we know so far is that opening night for, they weren't forced to or anything. They went and played an 8-man rotation. So I'm pretty comfortable projecting it to be an 8-man rotation tonight. Maybe it becomes a 9-man rotation where like Brissett or something plays, a handful of minutes, but I don't think there's any real reason to project a full 9-man rotation here based on what we saw in the first game. So that makes Jeremy Lamb look good. Like you said, 3,700. He played 24 minutes. He was in the closing lineup in a close game. That, looks pretty appealing. I think that Sabonis and Brogdon both become more enticing just because of how many minutes they played in that game. Not that you're going to, project them for 39 and 40 minutes, but at this point in the season, just knowing that they are capable of playing that many minutes and that the coaching staff isn't going to restrict them, it just gives them kind of a different level of ceiling than a lot of other players. So I like both of those guys. And then the other player, I guess, to talk about is Chris Duarte, who was $3,300 opening night. He was one of the best value pieces on the slate. DraftKings got real aggressive with that pricing, bumped him up to $6K. Yeah. Not interested in him there. The minutes were there for him. Opening night, which was good. He played 32.7 minutes. He shot really, really well from 3, had a 21% usage rate, but that's just not you don't want to chase that type of performance, right? Like the actual result that he got would still be good at 6K, but the underlying numbers don't suggest he's a 6K player. And it makes sense. He's not going to be a super high usage guy playing alongside Brogdon and Sabonis. You can't count on him going out there and making, 5 or 6, whatever it was, 3-pointers. So at 6K, if, some people want to chase him, they can have fun. I will enjoy the money I made with Duarte the other night and not go back to him until he comes back to like 4,500 or 5K.
I know what's about to come out of my mouth. I don't think that you said anything about him. Does $3,500 Torrey Craig stand out to you at all as a value play not getting ownership? He's not as bad as a fantasy performer as I thought that he's
really not. Yeah. And he played 28 minutes. I mean, he rebounds is the thing.
Yeah. I got him projected for 9, 7, 1.5 stocks. I don't like it.
Yeah. I mean, it's a 10-game slate. So I don't want to take some huge crazy stand on Torrey Craig, but I do think 3,500 is too cheap for what he did the other day. I would So Lamb is only projected for 7% ownership. Craig's at 3%. I think I would go to Lamb first, just because Lamb gives you more scoring upside, and Lamb can still, get some rebounds and everything too. So it's not like Lamb is completely scoring dependent. But I think, if you had to guess which player just puts up some stupid score that breaks the slate, Lamb would be my guess before Craig. But
yeah,
I think either one, as long as they're low owned, I think either one is fine.
I think both on DraftKings in particular, I think both Craig and Lamb look like guys where if that ownership stays low and there are guys in the 3s that do get it, those are the guys that are naturally going to come up for me, because I do think they stand out. Like, I have Torrey Craig as a 0.83 fantasy point per minute guy in my model. If you just asked me that before I saw it, I would have said 0.7. Like, I wouldn't even have thought about it.
He had a crazy year last year.
He really did. It's weird team, especially, and if they're going to do 8, even if they go to a 9-man rotation, like I gave O'Shea Brissett some minutes because I feel like they're just missing something in the front court too. Even if I do that, I can still get most of these guys to huge minutes. I don't know. The Pacers are weird. And this is a good spot against Washington. Although I'm really curious to see where Washington's pace goes over the next couple of games, because right now I'm sort of artificially inflating them from last year. And I don't know how fast Dinwiddie is going to play in relationship to Westbrook, but I assume it's slower.
I don't think there's any real reason to use last year at all. It's a different coaching staff, you don't have Westbrook.
So the decay on each game that shows up for me is really aggressive for pace. I just have no other mechanism right now, but every game is worth a lot as that slowly goes away. But Washington still projects as a fast team. I just need more data. Otherwise, I don't really know how else to do it. I will look to go see what they did in game 1 just to see if I need to manually make any couple adjustments. But by game 4 or 5, I'm already onto this season.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And I get what you're saying. I just think, and I mentioned it in the deep dive article before the game against Toronto, there's nothing you can really base anything on other than say, they were really fast last year. I assume they'll be at least somewhat fast this year, but I am more confident that they continue to be a weak defensive team than I am that they continue to be, the fastest team in the league.
Let's talk about your Wizards. Bradley Beal is questionable for tonight. Is that anything new? I didn't see anything on Beal, but I figured you would just know because you would know.
He was questionable last game too, if I remember correctly.
Okay, that makes me feel a little bit better then. Let's dig into him. He's 9,400 on FanDuel, 9,200 on DraftKings, and a guy that I can get to, and that would be fine. The rest of the Wizards, though, they are popping. 20% ownership on Kuzma on DK, 29% on FanDuel. We got 15% ownership on Dinwiddie on both sites. He's 5,600. KCP, 3,500 on DK. Guard forward eligibility as well. He's pulling 17% ownership. Montrezl Harrell is at 9. Played really, really well. Got a couple of the extra minutes. We'll see what that center rotation is going to be like. I'm just going to assume basically 24-24 moving forward, or at least for right now. There's a lot to like for the Wizards, but they might be a little overowned.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to like here too. Beal at 9,200. I think Beal is a better play tonight than he was opening night, because opening night you just had all that crazy pricing where basically every first round rookie was $4,000, and you had then you had a bunch of stars to pay up for. When you take a lot of that really good value at the bottom end off, it's going to start making guys like Bradley Beal at 9,200 look a lot better, because you're talking about someone that's going to have a 33% usage rate. He's got a massive ceiling just based on his role in this offense. So at 9,200, that starts to become really appealing on a slate like this. So I think Beal looks better today than he did before. Dinwiddie's still a strong option. Interested to see where his ownership ends up coming in, because he was, I thought, wildly overowned opening night, just given the number of really, really good options there were. He did fine for his price, but it wasn't anything crazy. I'm kind of curious, I don't, if this were 3 or 4 years ago, I'd be pretty confident that Dinwiddie just goes completely underowned here because people are so so dependent on game logs. Now it's not to that extent. People still use optimizers. I think he'll still be popular, but I think there's a decent chance that maybe you see a little bit less ownership than he deserves just because of how that game went. But he had the second highest usage rate on the team at 25%. His playing time was good or was decent. He played 26 minutes. That would be the biggest concern to me, is I don't know how quickly they're going to ramp Dinwiddie up. In the preseason, he played 21, 22, 25, 26 minutes. In his first regular season game, he played 26 minutes. So that was kind of one of the big concerns to me opening night, was is Dinwiddie really, he could, but is he really going to come out here and just play 32, 33 minutes right out of the gate? And at his ownership, you really needed that. So I think that's, a concern here. I would guess, like, I'm going to put him in for like 28 minutes. It's going to make him look like a good option, but I think that's my biggest concern with Dinwiddie is it doesn't seem very likely that he just jumps from like 26 minutes to 34 minutes or something.
I gave him 30.
Yeah,
I think that's I don't know where else to be.
Because the other thing to keep in mind
not
too
great
is,
at that point.
Right. The thing to keep in mind too from that last game is that it was a completely non-competitive game. Washington was up by 29 points late in the third quarter. Toronto made a little bit of a comeback in the fourth, but it wasn't a game where you needed to push Dinwiddie. Like if for example, he barely played. He played a minute and a half to close out the first half. So like, if the thought process was, let's get Dinwiddie around 30 minutes, but we want to save him to be playing the bulk of his minutes in the second half, then it became really easy for Wes Unseld to just say, oh, well, let's just save a few minutes and not play Dinwiddie 30 minutes. So I do think, given the way that game went, it's more reasonable to think he gets to around 30 minutes. Like, if this ended up being like a 1-point game and you only got 26 minutes for Dinwiddie, I'd be more concerned.
Yeah. Do you have anything else for the Wiz?
I agree with you on the center rotation. Gafford, Harrell probably get, on average playing around 24 minutes. Some nights will be 26 for one or the other. They both offer some upside at their salaries. They both also project as, pretty neutral plays. Kuzma, similar boat. Rebounding numbers for Kuzma could be pretty nice this year on this team. We saw that opening night. I don't think that's really surprising, but basically I think it's just, Beal, Dinwiddie, Kuzma, Harrell, Gafford all look like pretty solid options.
All righty. I missed this before, but Chill Introvert hit us with the super chat, said, appreciate you all. Been a good start to the season so far. Let's get it. Smash that like button. I agree, Chill Introvert. So thank you for the super chat and smash that like button, everybody. We're not even over 100 yet. If you guys are here and you're listening to this show and you haven't hit it, hit that thumbs up. Schedule for the rest of the day. Coming up immediately after this, NFL strategy on the contrary. Laffy, Awesemo himself, Alex Baker, and Neil. They're going to be talking some NFL. NHL strategy at 2 with Cliffy and Josh, not me. Yahoo NFL show, 3 p.m. Adam Kaufman, Eric. 4 p.m. PrizePicks college football show with Jordan and Matt. Then at 4:45, the NBA Deeper Dive. Adam will be back with Laffy, going an hour 15, plus NBA Live Before Lock with Greg and Terry. Lots of free content as well. NBA ownership rankings, NFL rankings, NHL top stacks, and MMA pro plays. If you're playing any of those sports, go check out the content that we have on the website because all 4 of those things are free. Now, we move on to Toronto at Boston. Toronto 6.5-point dogs, 219 total. Pascal Siakam is out. Al Horford is questionable. I think that is very important. On the Toronto side, I was heavy on Toronto on opening night. That did not work out well. I'm probably going back to a bit of these guys once again. Scotty Barnes, 4,500 on DraftKings, the highest projected owned player on DK for Toronto. Fred VanVleet is 6,900. Again, to me, another really weird price tag for him. I think it should be higher. I will happily have some OG Anunoby. I get to Gary Trent more than most people. That's probably going to happen again. I don't want it to. Weird team, but I'm going to get them against Boston in a terrible matchup.
Yeah, Scotty Barnes, the one that jumps out to me the most. He got a price bump on DraftKings, but it wasn't as aggressive as a lot of the other ones. You saw Duarte go from 3,300 to 6K. Barnes went from 3,400 to 4,500. And Barnes, I thought, actually had one of the more appealing games from a DFS standpoint on opening night, even though he didn't do very well in terms of fantasy points. He was fine, but nothing crazy. But he had a 23.5% usage rate. He had 9 rebounds in that game. So he was a rebound short of a double-double. He shot really, really poorly from the field. I think he ended up like 3 of 12, 3 of 13, something like that. But VanVleet and Anunoby tied for first in usage at 24.7%. Then with Scotty Barnes at 23.5. So I think his first game was actually really encouraging in terms of what he did on this team. And now you have him at only 4,500. The matchup sucks, but outside of that, I don't think there's a whole lot to be concerned about. Played 32.5 minutes, had a big role. So I like Scotty Barnes a lot. I agree with you that Fred VanVleet's salary is a bit low, at the very least for his ceiling. And I think even his medium projection is pretty solid at 6,900. So Those two look like the best options to me. OG Anunoby, the usage was up a bit. He's also relatively expensive, so I don't mind him, but don't love it either. One other spot to mention is Precious Achiuwa, only $3,600, only center eligible, which really hurts him on DraftKings. He's much more valuable with power forward eligibility like he had opening night, but I don't think we should be too discouraged by the fact he only played 18 and a half minutes in that game. He dealt with some foul trouble, particularly in the first half, played a really shortened rotation to open the third quarter as well. I still think that there is at least a pathway to him getting, 24 minutes or something like that in his good games. So not a priority for me, especially at center, but I do think that maybe people are going to be scared off of him a little bit more than they should just because of the foul trouble in game one.
On to Boston?
Goran Dragic also probably plays more minutes tonight than he did game one. He only played 21.7 minutes, didn't play at all in the fourth quarter. There was no reason for him to, but he played about he played about 14 minutes in the first half. If you get 26 to 28 minutes from Goran Dragic at 4,800, there's a pretty good chance he pays that off nicely.
On to the Boston Celtics. Assuming Al Horford plays in this spot, and that is the assumption that I'm going with right now. Not that I think it matters all that much, but it definitely nerfs Grant Williams. This is the interesting thing to me. So this is a team that went to a 9-man rotation. Josh Richardson did not play. He is probable for this one. And then we didn't have Horford. Two guys that are unquestionably going to be in this rotation when they are active. I don't think they're going to go to an 11-man rotation. I think one of Aaron Nesmith or Peyton Pritchard is probably the guy that goes away. I assume it's Nesmith over Pritchard just because of their skill sets, but I don't totally know that for sure. So I've got 10 guys in here right now. Jason Tatum is probably the guy I like the most. I certainly like him more than Jaylen Brown. I'm not going to be going to more Jaylen Brown just because he went crazy in the first game. And then Robert Williams is $7K on FanDuel, $6,200 on DraftKings. If he can play 30 minutes or even into the high 20s, he's going to not be 6,200 on DraftKings much longer. He's going to be like 8,500.
Yeah, you said high 20s to 30. He played 35 minutes in regulation.
But no Horford. So I don't think that's probably their goal either.
Yeah. I'm not saying that I think he starts playing 35 minutes out of the gate. I'm just saying that going.
He can.
Right. Yeah, he can. This isn't a situation.
It's the first time he's played over 30 minutes in his career.
Right. I guess that's what I was getting at is there's always a tendency, and I mean, I do it too, but it doesn't feel good when you have a player like Williams that in the past, he's always been in this role where for one reason or another, foul trouble, team rotation, all of that, he just never plays more than 24, 25 minutes. It's always when he steps into what should be a bigger role, it's always tough to confidently say, okay, I'm giving him 30 minutes. The fact that he came out and played 35 minutes in regulation, 45 minutes total in that game makes me feel pretty good about saying, okay, I can give Robert Williams 30 minutes here because he actually could play more. I don't feel like I'm projecting the very top of his minutes range. And he is an extremely good fantasy producer when he's on the floor. So 6,200 Robert Williams, he still has a relatively low floor. I worded that poorly. It's not even that it's relatively low floor. It's just that there's still volatility there. He fouls a lot historically. And there also is at least some level of uncertainty in what the rotation looks like if Horford plays. But assuming that Horford isn't just taking a ton of minutes from Robert Williams, because that would be stupid. Assuming you're going to get 28 to 30 minutes from Robert Williams, he's a 1.3 fantasy point per minute guy at $6,200 for 30 minutes. That's going to look really good.
We're projecting him for 6% ownership. If you're looking for a guy with a ceiling that's in single digits today, you found him. It's here. Now, it doesn't mean that he has to get there, but I got him projected for 11, 11, and 3.7 stocks as just a median. This dude is really, really good. There's a reason the Celtics paid him. If he gets his foul trouble in check, we're talking about a guy that can be a legitimate difference maker defensively for this Boston team. I don't get the sense that since Horford is questionable for conditioning that he's just going to go out there and play 30 minutes. So I think 20 minutes of Horford seems to be the most likely scenario here. I like Robert Williams more than I like anything else in this game.
So a quick point, because I think it's the right thought process, but not the right application. Someone mentioned that they don't think Robert Williams gets 5 blocks and 3 steals again. That's certainly like that is the right thought process. When you're looking back at someone that had a monster game and saying, oh, well, they're probably, not going to do that again. Robert Williams, like that's what the dude does. The main reason he averages 1.3 or whatever it is fantasy points per minute is because he just piles up defensive stats.
Yeah, like I got him at 3.7 of total steals and blocks. If we just assume that is an accurate number, getting to 6 of those is not all that outlandish.
Right? I don't think he gets 8, but it's not like that wasn't some crazy fluke game from Robert Williams.
Right. I don't have anything else for Boston. Do you?
You mentioned Tatum and Brown. Obviously, they're good plays. Outside of that, and I do prefer Tatum. I think you said that as well.
I did.
He was someone people were going back and forth on him in chat yesterday. I'm pulling it up now because I don't remember first. Actually, I'm not gonna be able to see it quickly, but he shot really poorly in game 1, I believe. So that's kind of just like the perfect spot to go with the guy that is the better fantasy producer. That's Tatum. He had a 30.6% usage rate. Brown was at 31.6%. Brown's effective field goal percentage was 66.7%. Tatum's was 26.7. Just, Jaylen Brown is fine. If you get to Jaylen Brown, cool. But between the two of them, don't let what happened in game 1 somehow convince you Jaylen Brown's a better fantasy producer than Jason Tatum.
Moving it along to Brooklyn at Philly. Just in case you're under a rock, Kyrie Irving will not be playing for the Brooklyn Nets. Ben Simmons will not be playing for the Philadelphia 76ers. Shake Milton also out. And then something I'm expecting that we see for like 50 games out of this year, Joel Embiid listed as questionable. Let's start it off on the Brooklyn side where James Harden pulling 23% ownership on FanDuel, 21 on DK. Durant, 6 on FanDuel, 11 on DK. I like Harden more than I like Durant, but given the way the ownership is shaking out, I'm going to have more Durant than Harden, I would imagine, unless I just have a lot of both. And then after that, I don't know how much Brooklyn I'm going to get to outside of maybe $3,800 Nick Claxton on DK. So what stands out to you from the Brooklyn Nets?
Harden's price is just still insane, and Durant's underpriced too for his upside. But Harden's numbers when he plays without Kyrie Irving and with Durant, the usage is insane. It was only 3 games last year, but not the usage, the assist percentage, 50.4% assist percentage. But then even overall, his assist numbers are just crazy without Kyrie on the floor. You expect that to be the case. So they're both going to get a lot of usage. Durant should get more rebounds and still get some assists, but Harden's role is just insane without Irving out there. So 9,400 for him looks really, really good. He's getting ownership, but I think he deserves it. Durant, from a ceiling standpoint, looks really good as well. Outside of that, pretty tough to find anything that really looks good. I do think if you continue to get 24 minutes from Nick Claxton, he's going to put up some really big fantasy games. It's tough to rely on him since he's a non-factor in terms of usage, but it's also worth mentioning he had kind of him and Harden weren't really on the same page in that first game. Harden kept trying to go to him on lobs and it just wasn't really working out. That's something where I think, as they get, I don't know if it's just a familiarity thing or if it was just a bad game for one of them, but like, if they're going to try and basically make Claxton Clint Capella, there's a massive ceiling for him.
Did you see it when it finally succeeded?
I don't think so. I had it on and I heard everyone go nuts, but
so Harden finally got him with a lob and Harden turns around and he's just like, finally. So I think he's legitimately looking for it. And they just they couldn't get that piece together. But when he got it, Harden literally acknowledged it on the floor, which made me think they're going to be going to this.
Yeah. And it's a situation too, where I just always, especially early in the season, I like attacking spots like this because there's volatility where, maybe Claxton just doesn't play nearly as many minutes. And this is all under the assumption that he starts again. If he doesn't start, just don't worry about him. But Griffin is, whatever. Aldridge looks washed. The Nets should want to get Nick Claxton into a bigger role. He's good. He fits well. They should want him, and he's young. So they should want him to succeed. And we probably haven't, or at least there's a chance we haven't seen the best of Nick Claxton yet. So that's always just really appealing to me early in the season when a guy's this cheap to say, man, his average performances at 3,800 are fine. And there is just some untapped ceiling here that we haven't really seen yet.
Philly? I don't have anything else for the Nets.
Oh yeah. Philly's still going to look appealing, I think. Still no Ben Simmons. So Embiid, who started out ridiculously well last game, only ended with 41.5 DraftKings points. I don't think he even stepped on the floor in the fourth quarter because the second unit got hot. But no fourth quarter minutes for Embiid, no fourth quarter minutes for Tobias Harris. I like going back to both of those guys. I think you probably don't get quite as much ownership going to them as they should. Embiid is ridiculously productive without Ben Simmons on the floor. His usage rate last year without Simmons on the floor was like 41%. Even if you assume that comes down a little bit as the sample size grows, you're just getting a ton of production from Embiid. Also, Tobias Harris overall, without Simmons on the floor, about 1.12 DraftKings points per minute. But you should get a lot of, actually, they didn't do it last game, which is weird. I thought they would stagger Harris and Embiid. They didn't. That hurts Harris a bit, but you're still talking about around 1.12 DraftKings points per minute for Harris, probably playing 35 minutes if this game's competitive at 7,200. So Embiid and Harris both really, really stand out.
If Joel Embiid is 5% owned, I can promise you and I are going to have a lot more than that.
Yeah. One other thing to mention. So Tyrese Maxey at 5,300, still a reasonable value. What's his projected ownership on DraftKings right now?
16.
Yeah, I think that's high. I think he's a reasonable value at 5,300. The reason I'm concerned about him is the same reason I was concerned about him game one. And before anyone points to how he finished up, he did play the fourth quarter. He had 7 points. He had 1 rebound, 2 assists in the fourth quarter. So he was having a fine game for his salary anyway, but then really padded those stats without Harris and Embiid on the floor, which goes back to the concern. Maxey played nearly every single one of his minutes alongside both of Harris and Embiid in the first half.
Yeah.
In the third quarter, it was the same thing. And then in the fourth quarter, he played without them. If you assume this game's competitive and that he's going to play virtually all of his minutes with those guys on the floor, he's just not going to be on average nearly as productive as his overall numbers suggest. Since the start of last year, he's played 166 minutes with both of Harris and Embiid on the floor. He's averaged 0.64 DraftKings points per minute. That didn't account for Ben Simmons. If you take Simmons off, it's 105 minutes, 0.73 DraftKings points per minute, 15.9% usage rate, 14.3% assist percentage. The minutes are nice. The talent level is nice. He still can just have some good games and get there. But I really think he's being overprojected for someone that's going to play all of his minutes in a competitive game alongside Embiid and Harris.
Do you have anything else for the Sixers?
No.
PrizePicks, everybody, daily prop-based contest, and you can use the promo code Awesemo to get a $100 first match deposit bonus. Free money is great, guys. If I told you can get into a contest and you were guaranteed to double up, you would do it immediately. It's the same situation, only you don't have to do the contest. Just put the 100 in, get another 100 on top of it. No sharks or optimizers or mass entry. You set a 5-player lineup if you want that can net up to 10x your entry fee. You can do multiple cross-sport entries. You can download the app in the App Store, go to Google Play or play on PrizePicks.com. You can use our free NFL and MLB player prop tools to help you make the best picks. I'm going to hit Adam with 3 of them for today. Adam, are you ready?
Yep.
FanDuel scoring. So we've got 3 points for steals and blocks. You lose 1 for turnovers. Over under 38 points for Fred VanVleet.
You said
fantasy points.
Oh, I was like, under?
Pretty sure you're taking the under then. Right.
Yeah.
38 fantasy points.
Yeah, I still would take the under.
Okay. I would take the over, but I think that's a pretty good number. Let's move it on to Jason Tatum. Over under 44 points.
That's about where I have him. I would take the over if I have to, but I think it's about right.
I got him at 45, so I would take the over as well, but I wouldn't go too crazy. Final pick here for PrizePicks. Tobias Harris, over under 42 fantasy points.
I have like 42.5. So
okay.
I'll take the over, but not with a ton of confidence.
I got him at 40, but that's one that I'm going to look into a little bit further. It's probably can get him to like 41 by the time I'm close. So I would take the under, but it is very, very close. PrizePicks, thank you very much for being the presenting sponsor of this show. We will now keep it moving to the New Orleans Pelicans at the Chicago Bulls. Pels are 7-point dogs, 222 total. No Zion Williamson, no Kobe White, and Josh Hart is questionable. Let's start on the Pelican side where We've got a lot of ownership on FanDuel coming to Nickeil Alexander-Walker at 5,700. He's $800 cheaper than he is on DraftKings. We've got a lot of ownership coming to Joval, 6,500. He's $700 cheaper than he is on DraftKings. After that, not a lot coming in here. So the floor is yours. What do you like from the Pels?
Ingram is the starting point for me. We saw a big uptick in his production last year when he played without Zion, and that makes perfect sense. There's no reason to think that would be fluky. 869 minutes without Zion on the floor last year, 1.25 DraftKings points per minute, usage rate up to 31.6%, assist percentage up to 26%. He just is much better without Zion on the floor. He played 36 and a half minutes against Philadelphia. Don't look at that and say, he would have played 40 if the game had been close. He subbed in earlier than he normally would have in the second half, trying to get that game back competitive. But actually, the game was competitive when he subbed in the third. I think he played through when he normally would have subbed out. But if you're expecting 36, 37 minutes from Ingram, he's going to look pretty good there given his increased production without Zion. I think Valanciunas is a reasonable option as well. We talk a lot about the center position. There's always, or almost always, going to be a lot of opportunity cost to the position. If you're going to the mid-range, you typically are going to want it to be guys that produce at a very high point per minute rate and at least give you the potential to get 50 raw points, and Valanciunas certainly does that. So Ingram and Valanciunas, I think, look the best to me on DraftKings. Alexander Walker did play a lot of minutes in that game, played 34 minutes. He potentially would have played like 36, 37 had that game been close to the end. So I think there's a ceiling on him, but he's a little bit more expensive than I would like. Devontae Graham played about 30 minutes, probably plays around 33, 34. If the game had been close, he's pretty cheap, but I also just am not sure. I think he's the fourth option here. I mean, Ingram clearly ahead of him. Valanciunas is going to get shots up. Alexander Walker tends to be pretty aggressive when he's on the floor. So I think it's a situation where you still see some good games from Devontae Graham, but they're going to be hard to rely on.
By the way, we got another ownership update like 10 minutes ago if you want to refresh that, just in case you have it in front of you. I don't have anything else for the Pels. We can move it over to Chicago.
Yep.
This is a really tricky team for me. We've got Vooch, Levine, DeRozan, Lonzo Ball, all owned like 12 to 15% on FanDuel. Vooch pulling a lot of ownership on DraftKings, as he should, because he's 7,800. Had a tricky day shooting, couldn't get to the line either in game one. Levine for 8K, DeMar for 7,100. Other than that Vooch price tag for 78 on DK, but center's just absolutely loaded on this slate too. Other than that price, I don't see anybody that I immediately want to get a lot of, but I will have little bits of Chicago across the board.
They're a really, really good tournament team, I think.
Yeah.
The pricing on DraftKings here, I mean, Vooch is completely wrong at 7,800. Vooch, I think, is a really, really good player. But the pricing on like Levine, DeRozan, even to some extent Lonzo, it's correct for their average production. Levine still might be a little bit low, but it leaves a ton of upside, because the thing to keep in mind when you have a team like this, where it's going to be kind of difficult night to night to point to exactly, how the offense goes or who does well, but there's a lot of times, it's not like every game they're just all going to, evenly share the workload and they're all going to have their average game. Night to night, you're going to get big games from different guys. And so when you see the salaries come down like this, 8K for Zach LaVine, had, I think, 52 DraftKings points opening night. It's not like that's some crazy outlier for him. He's a good player. He's likely to be either first or second on this team in usage. The usage opening night, I think, made sense. Vooch was at 29.3%, Levine at 28.4%, then a pretty big drop down to DeRozan at 22.2%, and Ball at 21.3%. I think, just over the course of the season, you would like Vooch and Levine to be getting the bulk of the usage there. So at 8K, there is a massive ceiling for Zach LaVine. There's clearly a huge ceiling for Vooch. I think his median projection blows that salary out of the water as well. But even DeRozan, even if you assume his average usage rate is going to be in like that 22 to 23% range, there's going to be some games where he just is making his shots. He takes more. He's only 7,100. So in tournaments, DeRozan, Ball are fine. I like Levine quite a bit. And then I absolutely love Vooch at 7,800.
I like it. I don't have anything else to add here.
Yeah, me neither. You got 27 minutes from Caruso. That's not really that important for DFS, though, I don't think.
Oklahoma City at Houston. I think both teams want to lose this one pretty aggressively. Questionable. Daniel House. That's it. So at the very least, we kind of know what's going on for this one. We'll start on the Oklahoma City side. 2-point dogs, 223 total. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is 7,500 on FanDuel. And for reasons that make no sense to me, 6,700 on DraftKings. He's pulling 30% ownership across both. He's probably the best play of the day relative to salary on both sites. Lou Dort at 12% on FanDuel, Favors at 11% and 12% on FanDuel and DraftKings respectively got the start in the first game. Unquestionably, we're both going to Shai. I don't think that you're going to be talking me out of that one. But do you like anything else for OKC?
Yeah, I mean, Shai is obviously one of the best plays on the entire slate. Good matchup against Houston, really good player. It's, the thing to keep in mind, you can look at Oklahoma City and say, man, this team sucks. I don't want to go to them, whatever. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is good. Don't lump him in with a lot of the other guys on this team. No. He's going to have a good year. He's going to be a great fantasy option. He probably ends up being like 8,500 in the spot a month from now. So 6,700 for him looks great. I think Josh Giddey looks like a good value option. He's one of the few rookies that did not see a significant price bump, only went from 3,800 to 4,100. He played 28 and a half minutes, give or take, against Utah. He is someone that can score a bit. He can facilitate. We did see him get run with the second unit as well. Not every minute that Gilgeous-Alexander wasn't on the floor, but a nice chunk of them. That's something that should benefit him. So I like Josh Giddey at 4,100. I don't know that I like him at 30 whatever percent ownership he's getting right now. But I think 35.6% ownership. Not I don't think he's that good of a play, but I do think he's one of the better value options. Beyond them, you can kind of throw darts at a $3,600 Favors if you want. But like you were saying, the center position is absolutely loaded. It's a position where, I don't want to say you have to get a ton of raw points because there's a ton of good guard plays too. There's plenty of forward options. You can still build really high upside lineups, but knowing that you just can roster less centers than you can other positions, it makes the opportunity cost a bit higher going to someone like Favors. I
have nothing else to say about Oklahoma City.
Me neither. I was tempted to point out $5,100 Lou Dort, but I'll let it go.
4,800 on FanDuel, I like a bit, but I like Lou Dort more than most people, generally speaking.
You might like Lou Dort more than everyone else, and then you might also like him. You might also like him the least of anyone on this show.
That's fine with me. I can handle that. On to Houston. Yikes. $8,100 Christian Wood on FanDuel. I like Christian Wood. To me, that's a little high, but definitely a guy that I want to get to a lot. He's 7,100 on DraftKings, and that's part of the reason why you don't play Derek Favors. He's projected for 30% ownership. Looks great. Jalen Green, 4,800 on DraftKings. I would like to go back there pretty aggressively. Kevin Porter Jr. on DraftKings, 7,300. That's probably a bit too high for him right now. Well, he's 6K on FanDuel and projected for 22% ownership. So Wood, Porter, Green, those are the three guys you want. Depends on site for aggression as far as I'm concerned. I don't really want much else. No, I don't really need Jayshawn Tate. I don't really need Eric Gordon. Wood, Porter, Green are the trio that I'm looking at.
Yeah, same here. The pricing on Green and Wood in particular, I think is just broken. Jalen Green has so going back to the start of the preseason, Jalen Green, 21% usage rate, 15.5% assist percentage, 0.77 DraftKings points per minute. But at his salary, and given that he's likely to play, plenty of minutes, he played 32 minutes opening night, and that was a game where the starters didn't play the final 8 minutes of the game. He just kind of doesn't have. He's priced for his floor right now. So there's not really much risk in going to Green. Same kind of thing with Christian Wood. Kevin Porter is more of like the tournament play, for lack of a better phrase. I mean that in the sense where he's not really underpriced like Christian Wood and Green are. I wouldn't expect to be getting the Porter in any sort of cash build, but he's still got a massive ceiling at 7,300. He had a 33.3% usage percentage opening night. Next highest was 22.7% for David Nwaba. Christian Wood was at 20.9. Jalen Green.
Even Nwaba had the second highest usage rate for Houston.
Yeah, but he played 17 minutes. He was playing with the second unit. He played garbage time too. It all came in garbage time. He had 6 points in that final stretch.
Okay, but I was going to say that's probably not the goal for Houston moving forward.
Right. But like amongst the actual players, Porter was at 33.3%. Wood was at 20.9. Gordon was at 19. Green was at 17.5. I think those numbers come up for Wood and for Green, but the point being, Kevin Porter goes out there and chucks up shots and makes plays and gives you a very, very high ceiling. He's just not quite. He's just not as underpriced as Wood and Green are.
Are you going to get to any Şengün here? 3,900 doesn't just like. I'd rather go to Favors because I think that he could play more minutes. Not that I don't like Şengün, but like I just think that I'm going to have better centers.
Yeah, it's just save Şengün for when you get that when you get like the 3-game slate with Houston on it, and you can, like last night you had the 2% on Jang, you had the 1% on Dedmon. Wait for those slates and just jam in Şengün.
Yeah. All right. I got nothing else for OKC Houston.
Me neither.
San Antonio Spurs at the Denver Nuggets, 220 total. Spurs 7.5-point dogs. No Zach Collins for San Antonio. Obviously, no Jamal Murray for the Denver Nuggets. This isn't a question about this team, but how the hell does Thad Young not play in the first game? And does he play now?
Yeah, I don't know. It was pretty weird. I don't have an answer.
I think he might be like the third best guy on the Spurs, so I'm not entirely sure what they're doing there. DeJounte Murray and Derek White both pulling some ownership. Call it like 15% on average across both sites. That's fine with me. I think they're both like properly owned. Derek White for 5,900 on FanDuel, probably that's a pretty good price tag for him. Keldon Johnson for 5K is probably my most interesting guy relative to ownership on DK. I just don't like getting to the Spurs all that much.
Yeah, the pricing is pretty nice, though. I mean, DeJounte Murray at 7K last year averaged 1.1 DraftKings points per minute, or 1.12, somewhere in there. There's the potential for him to have an even bigger year this year. When you look at his rates last year without DeRozan, you didn't see much of a change, but there's definitely, the potential for him to just step up into a bigger role here. He played 31 minutes opening night. That's without, a final rotation in a game where they destroyed Orlando. So in a competitive game, you could certainly see 33, 34 minutes from DeJounte Murray. I think the price the price is a little bit cheap. I think the ownership makes sense. Same can be said for Derek White. The one thing that I would point out negatively about White is that last year he did take a hit playing alongside DeJounte Murray. He averaged about 0.9 DraftKings points per minute. He's going to get minutes without Murray on the floor. You should see them staggered, but still a lot of his minutes are going to come alongside Murray, which makes him a little bit less productive. And then you mentioned Keldon Johnson. I'm with you on that. He had a 24% usage rate in the preseason. I was interested to see how that carried over to the regular season. And so far it has 23.6% usage rate opening night. Third highest on the team behind Lonnie Walker and Murray. So at 5K, not a core piece for me, not somebody I'm building around or relying heavily on, but I do think Keldon Johnson gives you a pretty nice ceiling at that price.
Anything else for the Spurs?
Pirtle's cheap, but the same thing about center. Just going to be tough to play like a $5,700 Pirtle when I can play a $7,100 Christian Wood.
For the Denver Nuggets, Nikola Jokic at 16% ownership on DK. I like that, but if Joel Embiid is going to be half of that, if that's just even for the Q tag, that's fine. I'm going to just be getting to more Joel Embiid. I still like Jokic a lot because he's Nikola Jokic. He might be the second best fantasy performer on a permanent basis right now. Michael Porter Jr., I think, is underpriced at 6,300, pretty aggressively so on DraftKings, projected for 24% ownership. I think Will Barton, Aaron Gordon, both more than viable, right around 10 to 15% ownership. What are you doing with the Nugs?
I'm with you on Jokic. Obviously love Jokic here. He's one of the best fantasy producers in the league. I do prefer Embiid just because of Simmons being out, and then also being projected for less ownership. But Jokic, a very strong play as well. And it's not like his ownership's crazy. I agree with you on Porter. He played 34 minutes last game. There's, at the very least, the potential for increased usage with Jamal Murray out. Obviously Jokic is going to get his, but when Murray is in, it's typically Jokic gets his, then Murray, then, the rest gets sent out to Porter and Barton and Gordon. Now, night to night, one of those guys needs to step up as the second scorer. A lot of the time it's going to be Porter. So I like that salary. And then a positive to mention on Will Barton, who had a very strong opening night. In the first half, he played every single one of his minutes alongside Nikola Jokic, which isn't exactly what you want. In the second half, he ran with the second unit. So you got a total of about 6.5 second half minutes where Will Barton was playing with PJ Dozier, Campazzo, Jeff Green, and JaMychal Green. He wasn't super productive in those minutes, but over the course of a season, he should be. If that becomes the normal rotation and he's getting 12 to 13 minutes as the scorer with the second unit, he's going to have a really nice year from a fantasy standpoint. So I like him at 5,700.
All righty. I don't see any down the line guys for Denver, so I'm done with the Nuggets.
Agreed.
All righty.
No Bones Island.
No Bones Island, unfortunately. If you want to check out what we have behind the paywall, use the promo code Curry when signing up. Get 50% off your first week of Awesemo Plus Platinum. That's access to everything. It's not just basketball. All of our premium content and tools, projections, ownership, our boom bust tool, all of our top whatevers, top stacks, top pitchers, top hitters for baseball, top stacks for hockey, but you get it, top stacks for hockey, top stacks for NFL. We got lineup builders and more. This offer is valid through Monday, October 25th. So you have a couple more days yet. Hurry up, lock in this deal right now. Start your Awesemo Plus membership for only $15. 2 more games to go. Let's close this out. Phoenix and LA. Really nice late night hammer from a basketball quality perspective. Not so sure this one's one I want to get a lot of from a DFS perspective, other than some super obvious plays. Chris Paul is probably the best play for Phoenix. I don't know, 8K and 7,300. I find Phoenix to just be wildly uninteresting as a DFS play.
That's typically where I'm at. They just end up being guys that I sprinkle in across 150 lineups for the upside. Devin Booker at 8,200. He doesn't project as well as plenty of other options, but he's still going to go have some Devin Booker games where he has, 60 DraftKings points at low ownership. So he's just, someone I like using where I need a contrarian piece, but he's not someone I'm actively building around. Same can be said for Paul. Same can be said for Ayton. They all have nice ceilings. I also can just, pretty quickly name multiple guys at their positions that look better.
Yeah, they're a really good real team. They're not a particularly good fantasy team. So
right.
I can't really give any thoughts. The highest anybody showed up in my sim on FanDuel or DraftKings is 7% Devin Booker. So you're just not going to get a lot out of me in this one. On the Lakers side, we unquestionably have to talk about the big 2.5. LeBron James, Anthony Davis, and Russell Westbrook. These guys are all projected for basically no ownership right now. 1% across the board. Feels incorrect to me. We'll see if that comes up a little bit. I like the Lakers a little bit more if they're not going to be owned at all. Someone's going to pop.
Maybe.
Probably.
Yeah, like more. Yeah, it's
look, if they're 9,100, 8,600, and 8,900, I'm also willing to take my chances.
Yeah, you can kind of just play back what we were saying about, or what I was saying about the Bulls, and apply it to the Lakers too. If LeBron were 10-5 and Westbrook were 9,500 and Davis were 10K, you just really wouldn't have interest in playing them, because you're just saying like, okay, if I catch the big game, I basically paid the appropriate salary. The reason they're appealing here is they're priced for what they're normally going to do. Normally, none of these guys are going to be great options if you just take their average production. But on a night-to-night basis, you're going to get a lot of games where LeBron goes off, or Westbrook goes off, or Davis goes off, as opposed to them all just having that same average game every single night. So that's where they become appealing. And it's where I think people mess up a lot in tournaments, is not having any sort of mechanism or way to make to account for that in their lineups. If you're just taking median projections and building lineups, you're just not going to get much LeBron. You're not going to get much Westbrook or Davis. But if you're doing something, whether it's using randomness, there's a variety of ways to do it, but doing something to say, okay, like, these guys still have massive ceilings. They are very cheap for what they are capable of doing on a basketball floor, and nobody is rostering them. So I will, that's where they become, that's what makes them really appealing tournament options.
No one else on this team is a really appealing tournament option to me, though.
No, I mean, Bazemore's up to 4,500, Melo's up to 4,600. I don't see much of anything there. For what it's worth, from game one, we had kind of talked about, it would be interesting to see how the usage played out. LeBron, 32.2%. Davis, 29.6%. Russ, 18.5%. LeBron was second on the team to Rajon Rondo with a 25% assist percentage as well. Through one game, it ran through LeBron like it should. Davis, second piece, in terms of usage. And then Westbrook took the back seat, didn't do anything, had a 30% true shooting percentage. I think that's how it should play out. I still think you're going to have some games where Westbrook, just has a big game based on talent. But I think LeBron still looks good here. I think Davis looks good, and then Westbrook would be like my third guy.
All righty. Well, let's close it out. Utah Jazz at the Sacramento Kings. Jazz 6-point favorites, 226.5 total. Rudy Gay out for Utah. Mo Harkless questionable for the Kangs. And Utah is sort of just North Phoenix, because this is the same team every time. We know their rotations. We know what they're doing. They're all priced appropriately for all intents and purposes. I will have random bits of Utah across the board. I have no priorities here. I don't see anything that we should really talk about a lot.
Only thing I really want to mention is that Mike Conley is $5,700. He's probably playing around 30 minutes if this game's competitive. He played about 25 and a half minutes without a final rotation against Utah, or against OKC rather. So I do think that's worth a mention just because it's a really cheap price tag for a fantasy point per minute guy in Conley. Mitchell's kind of like Booker in the sense that he can just go out there and throw up these massive games, but he's also more expensive than Booker. He's more expensive than Levine. It's going to be tough to get to Mitchell. Kind of the same thing for Gobert when you consider all of the options at the center position.
Yeah, like, do I think one of the 5-6 best guys on the Jazz has like a quote unquote ceiling game today? Yeah, probably. But good luck figuring out which 5%er you need to have 25% of.
On the, I don't even know if there is one. I'm assuming there's a 2-game 10 o'clock slate. Hassan Whiteside did play 18 minutes. Granted, some of that was garbage time, but he got all of the backup center minutes. So that's a spot that you can look to on that slate.
Only De'Aaron Fox on FanDuel is north of 10% ownership for the Kings. That's at 16. I agree with it. Everybody else is like unowned to 2 or 3% ish. And I don't have a ton of interest for Sacramento against, one of the 5 best defenses in basketball. It's not a spot for me for the Kings.
Yeah, tough spot, tough prices. 8,400 for De'Aaron Fox. He certainly fits into that Devin Booker, Zach LaVine mold, but I would rather get to those guys before I get to Fox. I do think Fox is very good, and I do like that his salary dropped aggressively after opening night. He went from 9,300 to 8,400. It at least makes him playable in tournaments. The rest of these guys, I just can't really make any sort of case for. Harrison Barnes, 7,300. He showed you what his ceiling looks like opening night, but I'm not paying for trying to get another 8 or 9 3-pointers from Harrison Barnes. Halliburton is relatively expensive, and it's just not a really good matchup either. Davion Mitchell at 3,400. If you're playing 150 lineups and need some really cheap guy, you can take a shot, but there's just not much of anything here for me.
700 viewers in here right now, 168 likes. You guys are asleep at the wheel. I'm not happy with the performance of the thumbs ups for this show. I think we brought the goods over this past hour. Hit that thumbs up. Let's get north of 200. And I think 250 should be in our sights. Adam, sum it up. Who are your favorite plays for today before we get out of here?
I already forget because I wasn't listening to myself talk.
Smart though.
Yeah. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Jalen Green, I think look really, really good. They both stood out. Joel Embiid. I like going back to Harris. I love James Harden. I really like Vooch. I like Christian Wood. I'll leave it there. Oh, Scotty Barnes. I like going back to him as a value option.
Ross K asking about Bagley. If you have to ask that question, don't play NBA DFS.
That's a dick move. Like, if you didn't pay attention to the first game or to Twitter, it's a reasonable question. But Marvin Bagley's not in the rotation.
If you didn't pay attention to the first game or Twitter for NBA DFS, my point stands.
Okay, if you were busy on Wednesday, like you would, if I had gone to like the baseball game Wednesday or something and not done content, I probably would assume, but until I started researching, that Bagley was in the rotation.
You know what happens when you assume, Adam? The show ends. Thank you guys for joining us. Thank you to PrizePicks for being the presenting sponsor. It's been great. Ross K, I love you. Good luck tonight, everybody. Keep your eyes peeled for contenders and all of our other content. Deep dive from Adam later today. Deeper dive from Adam and Laffy. Live before lock. All that good stuff. Win some money, everybody. Enjoy your weekend. We're out of here.